Hello, friends. Chris Coursey here, president of Thrive Today, and I want to welcome you to the Relational Skills in Real Life podcast. I'm glad you're here. Today's topic is on assessing your joy. That's right. Did you know that you could measure your levels of joy? We can also measure your levels of pseudo joy, or what we might call false joy. Do you know that you could pay thousands of dollars to have your brain scanned and we could see the level of joy and activity in your brain's orbital prefrontal cortex in the right hemisphere? Just a few $1,000s. Or do you know that there's a free resource designed to help you assess your levels of relational joy? And you can gauge those pseudo joy levels as well. This is called the Joy Cue, and we're going to talk about the Joy Cue today and how to grow relational joy levels. That's right. Thankfully, God made our brain to be plastic, which means it can grow throughout your lifespan when you have the right ingredients. In 2012, we released a book called Joy Starts Here with Jim Wilder, Ed Corey, Sheila Sutton, and myself. And in each chapter, we released a Bible study. There were exercises and assessments. Well, the team at Life Model Works took all those assessments and they updated them and revised them into what's now called the Joy Cue. Just like, measuring your IQ or measuring your EQ, we can measure our joy. This is very exciting. That joy is measurably different than happiness, right? Glad to be together, joy. And this assessment not only gauges your joy levels, it helps you to recognize where you're low on joy. And higher joy and peace levels correlate with lower depression and better mental health, while pseudo joy results correlate with increased depression and lower life satisfaction. So our friends at Life Model Works have this joy cue that you can take and really monitor your joy levels as you practice relational skills and as you practice growing your joy. Some of you are just learning about skill one, what we call shared joy, and you want to not only look at your joy levels and assess your joy levels, but you want to take your joy levels to a whole new level. Whereas some of you have already taken the joy cue at some point in your life and you're looking for next steps after doing the assessment. You want to lower the false joy levels and deepen your genuine relational joy levels so that you grow your capacity, so that you can better stay your relational self in difficult times. Well, friends, no matter where you are on this journey of joy and regardless of your experience, let's look at what we can do to raise our joy levels and get rid of the things that we do to compensate for low joy. You see, low joy hurts, right? Low joy is painful. God designed us for bonding and connection where people are glad to be together. And your brain scans the environment looking not only for a recognizable face, but looking to see if those faces are glad that you're here. You see, joy is about connection. That's what joy is about, connecting with family and community where people enjoy us and we enjoy them. Joy is very specific and our brain takes joy very personal. Our right brain monitors those faces in the environment, listens for voice tone, it notices body movements and gestures to discern whether someone is genuinely glad that we're here. And your brain wants to know the answer to the question, are these faces glad to see me? Now, a lot of this stuff is happening at a level that we're not aware of. It's just happening. But we surely feel it when someone lights up to see us or when someone sees us and they're not glad that we walked into the room. You see, the absence of joy filled connections and relationships leave us vulnerable to isolation, attachment pain, which is loss, where we feel empty, we feel alone, and our brain does not like feeling empty and alone. We are wired for connection where we belong in a spiritual family or in a community. And so ultimately, joy is belonging personified by faces who light up to see us. And the good news here, not only is this for our community, right? Joy is also for our relationship with the living God, that a lot of people are pleasantly delighted to discover that Jesus is genuinely glad to be with them. I've been doing ministry for going on 30 years, praying with people. And whether it's a pastor, a seminary professor, or just a caregiver, a counselor, a therapist, people are really surprised to find out that Jesus is not only with them, but he's glad to be with them. They sense his smile, they sense his warmth and his compassion. And people will often ask, why is Jesus so glad to be with me? Right? Because maybe they thought he'd be disappointed or they thought he'd be angry with them or cold in some way. And I encourage them to ask Jesus, Jesus, why are you glad to be with me? This is just such a profound reality, and it is good news that we have a God who's glad to be with us. And this reminds me of my friend Rebecca, who grew up in a low joy home where her family focused on really trying to follow the Bible, but they were rather rigid and even abusive in how they disciplined their children. There really weren't a lot of emotions other than anger. So Rebecca just felt alone and lost in her family as a child. As she got older, she found a counselor who helped her work on her healing. And this counselor was genuinely glad to be with her, which really started to change Rebecca's life. And her counselor knew about Thrive, so she encouraged Rebecca to come to Thrive. And you know what? Rebecca came to Thrive with a friend and started practicing relational skills. And this practice really took Rebecca's joy levels to a whole new level. And this was a big part of the transformation that God was doing in her life. This joy grew her capacity. It helped her create belonging around her, and the joy thawed out some of those frozen places in her. So not only could she get healing, but she could work on growing her maturity as she addressed the lack of good things in her family growing up. So over time, her friends barely recognized her because she glowed with joy, and coworkers also noticed the change, and roommates noticed the change. It's like, what's gotten into you? Why are you smiling all the time? So what's really neat about this change for Rebecca is not only the good stuff that she's growing, but she also had to deal with the ways she learned to survive and to compensate for the lack of joy growing up, right? She had what we know as beeps from my friend Ed Corey. Beeps where when we gravitate towards behaviors, experiences, events, people, and substances to compensate for low joy, right? So she had to give up some of the sugar and the sweets as well as some of her behaviors that she had learned to deal with her attachment pain. So Rebecca was not the same person. She was now better living from the heart that Jesus had given her. And you know what? This reminds me of John 15, where Jesus prays that the disciples would have his joy to the full. And the joy to the full that God wanted for the disciples. And this is also where Jesus talks about being connected to the vine. And so he prayed his disciples would stay connected to the vine, would have God's joy. And so what happens when we're building joy? It becomes internalized, and we start to build security when we experience this joy. As our capacity grows, we become more secure, more stable, more confident people. We learn to anticipate joy in our relationships as well as our walk with the living God. Just think about it when you pray and talk to God. Do you sense that God's glad to be with you? Do you sense that there's a smile on Jesus's face? Well, I want to encourage you today to reflect on someone who conveys God's joy to you. Who lights up to see you? Where do you light up to see other people? I want to encourage you here to sit with the Lord for a few minutes and reflect on the ways that his joy has been expressed to you through other people. All right, as Jesus talked about in John 15, about being the true vine and that we can abide in him and bear fruit. Thank God for his joy and ask him what else Jesus wants you to know today about his joy for you. And then as you sit there with the Lord and you get some peaceful thoughts, share your peaceful thoughts with some friends. Now, friends, for those of you who want to know where you land on your joy levels and you want to take that assessment, I want to encourage you to visit lifemodelworks.org, lifemodelworks.org, and you can go to the Joy Queue, and you can even have your church or your organization take the Joy Queue together. And this will help you better assess your joy levels. And if you recognize that joy is a weakness that needs some growth, then I want to encourage you that you can build your own joy levels by going through our Share Joy Habit Builder course. You can work on the joy building exercises, one exercise at a time with a friend or two. And there are two ways to access this course. One, you can purchase the individual course on the learning platform, or you can join our membership at a monthly rate and get access to the Shared Joy course and all our other practice courses at an affordable monthly price. Visit thrivetoday.org to learn more about that. Friends, it's my prayer and my hope that this is the start of something good for you today.